Yeah. So thank you everyone for spending your Saturday morning, your Saturday afternoon or evening, wherever in the world you are. I'm really grateful, and we really appreciate you coming to join us today. It's a blessing, if for want of a better word, and I really appreciate us, like, and really excited to have this conversation on decolonizing design as a cultural reclamation. I think this been a work I've been doing for the last 6 years as part of through from my PhD to publishing two books out of this topic. So it's something that's really dear to my heart. And the first time, it started off with my name, just questioning why. I think growing up as a kid and having my name as Yao and everybody asking me, what is your English name? I think that's where the idea comes from, where I was like, why do people care about my English name? I don't. And I'll go back to my dad and I'll ask him, why don't you have an English name? He's like, why do you need an English name? And so when I started my PhD, that's when I realized I don't really need an English name. That shouldn't be a question people should even be asking. So this is where a born out of trying to find who I am and trying to locate myself in the world as a black person, as an African, and as a man. So trying to understand where I come from, where my situation, where I situate myself in the world, and so this conversation is something that just it's personal, it's academic, it's dear to my heart. So I welcome each and everyone, and I really appreciate your time and taking time off your Saturday morning, I think, to join us today. So my name is Yaw Ofosu-Asare, and yeah, Yaw Ofosu-Asare, and that, like Yaw in Ghana. So in Ghana, if you're not, like, we give names based on the days we were born. So every day has a name. That's the Akan tribe. Other tribes also have their different ways of naming. So my dad is an Akan. My dad is from the Achim. My mom is Ewe. They have a different naming system. So Adenya will be talking about that. So Yao means was born on a Thursday, so and a female version will be Ya. So that's my first name. And I'm a lecturer at RMIT University in Melbourne, Australia. I teach mainly communication design. So and been there for over a year now, and I've been teaching mainly first year studio classes. And I did my PhD also here in Australia, Gold Coast, Australia. I did it at Southern Cross Uni, where I looked into decolonizing African design through storytelling, poetry, and African philosophy. So, and then after that, I published two books, African Design Futures and Decolonizing African Design. So the presenters we have today are going to present their works through two chapters of the book, which I think is going to give us a really fascinating conversation. We're going to really enjoy what they are presenting. So the this con this the goal of this conversation comes from it's an a dialogue about what truly means to design from Africa rather than for Africa. So to shift focus towards a more self-determined creative perspective and cultural agency. It seeks to connect design education, cultural heritage, creative practice, bridging academic thought with lived experience, and building a more grounded and inclusive and imaginative foundation for Africa, for design across the continent. So today what we have is it's not just designers. We have a lot of different perspective. Like the conversation, the idea is to bring a really rich mix of conversation where to really unpack what it actually means, what it means design means in an African context. So we have designers, we have semiotics philosophers, we have performative we have philosophers who are going to have a conversation about what African design actually means. So the first presenter is Adali. She is Ghanaian, and she is also known as Abeta Moti. She holds a BA in Communication Studies with specialization in journalism from the Ghana Institute of Journalism. She's a writer, a photographer. She developed a deep interest in semiotics, during her studies and completing a project on knowledge of ever symbols and among Ghanaian journalists, which is very something I'm really keen to learn about and really hear what she has to tell us. And the second presenter is Arnold Sigala. He's from Cameroon. He's a Cameroonian designer and entrepreneur, and the founder and creative director of Universe. Sorry, I can't. My tongue doesn't allow me to mention that word. I've tried several times, which was established in October 2022. He's a five-time award nominated creative. He's currently a nominee for prestigious 2025 Cameroon Youth Award for Creativity. And then the third person is Kwame Boafo, who's been very helpful in bringing this conversation to life. So I went to him with ideas like, this is what I want to do, and we through meetings and through his generosity, we came up with this idea and this open forum. So he's a scholar and a movement maker working at intersections of theater, performative studies, religion, and cultural history. His research engages Ghana religious processions in Accra as forms of embodied knowledge and memory making. And he uses his work to write back and reclaim indigenous epistemology and praxis that has been sidelined in politics of knowledge. And the final person is Lawrence J. Okoth. He's a Ugandan designer, industry designer based in Kampala, Uganda, with over a decade experience in human-centered design. He applies human-centered design methods to drive inclusive design processes across various domains, including product, services, systems, and architecture. His work spans the humanitarian development sectors, including collaborating communities and small business and organizations. So before we start the presentation, I would like us to each and everybody to try and keep their microphones and videos off when not speaking, because of we are afraid maybe we'll be having bandwidth issues because of where everybody is located. And the event will be recorded and shared online. Let me know if you are not comfortable with being recorded, and then after the meeting, after the conversation, we could edit you out or try as much as possible to accommodate. And everyone registered will receive the recording link afterwards to share on their own platforms or reflect or watch it. And then the last but not the least is Hannah Evans. She is my colleague at RMIT. She's also a lecturer in communication design. She's going to be in the background helping me with the moderation and trying to get everything running smoothly. So thanks everyone. Thanks everyone once again for joining us. So we're gonna start off with Adenya. She's asked me to share her slides. I'm just gonna quickly go on my laptop and share her slides. So,
I gave you two, maybe a PowerPoint slide.
yeah.
There's one in PDF.
Yeah, I found it. It's there. Just I have so many things open up. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Can I start?
Yeah, you can start. Yeah.
Okay, so as Yaw said, my name is Adenya Adali. As opposed to Yaw, I didn't know I knew Adenya was part of my names, but I didn't know it was registered, and so I had to go and do my passport before I realized it. By then, I wasn't so keen on having a lot of names, so I just used my Albert Amoti until I went to university and I realized, okay, I could use Adenya for my creative purposes. Yeah, so I'm a Monday born, so can you hear me? Okay, I think you can hear me. I'm a Monday born, so I'm called Ajo. I'm also a twin, so I'm called Achukwe, but my twin brother is called Achu. So for here, we call Adenya. Today, my topic would be on visual culture and symbolism in African design. Under the main topic, decolonizing design as cultural reclamation. I see this topic as very important because slavery came and colonization came, and recently I've been thinking how much we've lost due to slavery and colonization as the African continent, and why we need to reclaim our voice, including our visual voice. And so I want to start with a song. It's a Bobobo song. I pardon with my voice. So it goes like this. Ameto woyona, ameto woyona, amade keme yo amobube yeto. Eyata no vinye, lebe na nusila siwo, na donku nyasi ajibe na, ameto woyona. So it simply says that what you have is what you own, or what you call your own. And in the Ghana, that is in Ewe. And in the Ghana language, it's called Ono Jiono. What is yours is what you own. And so I'm an Ewe. So Ewe, the Ewe ethnic group is the second and sometimes the third largest ethnic group in Ghana. And the largest ethnic group in Togo, and one of the largest in Benin. And we also have a presence in Nigeria and all over the world. And so I would be zooming in on the work I do. I research into Evejesiwo, recently renamed Adonjesiwo, and also look at the broader perspective also, and look at other symbols from other ethnic groups in Africa when we have the time. So I will look at, this is one symbol I like so much, Laglahoho. Yeah, so it's a symbol of lifelong learning. And so even as I learn, I'm still in the process of learning. If Yaw and Kwame had contacted me 2 weeks before, I would have said no. But when they contacted me, I felt ready, especially when we renamed the symbols as Adon Jesuwo. And so Adon means advice or to give counsel. And also it means idea. And so as we go on, we look at why that name. Please, next slide. Yeah. So in Yaw's work, he talked about, he quoted Chimamanda Adichie's The Danger of a Single Story TED Talk, that a single story creates stereotypes, whether positive or negative stereotypes. During colonizations, we were forced to assimilate the cultures of the West, and including our language, our spoken language. Some of us had to speak English, and some people had to speak French, some people had to speak Portuguese. We shouldn't be having this conversation in English, but it is what it is. So after colonization, there have been some efforts. So, for example, in Ghana, which became Ghana from Gold Coast, in our parliament, we see a lot of Edinburgh symbols. And during the Declaration of Independence, I realized that our leaders were in Batakari. I think I'm wearing one. Yes. So our leaders tried to bring back that community spirit. And one of them is introduction of the boarding house system, where people from all over the country could, high school students could converge on one campus and learn and be able to learn from each other. And so we have different cultures as Africans, as the world. So when we're looking at design, are we looking at just Western design or Eastern design or African design or the global South? And when we come to the global South, when we come to Africa, which designs are we looking at? In my case, which symbols are we looking at? And Yaw talked about, even as you're looking at Africa, even though we have that Ubuntu spirit and we kind of have unity, we also one of the most heterogeneous societies. And so we all have something we can relate to, even though we have a lot of similarities, we also have our unique features. And it's also in our symbols. Mostly when we talk about African symbols, most people go into Edikra symbols. And so today we want to introduce other symbols to you, especially from our ethnic group, which is the Ewe people or the Ewe symbols or the Adanjesu. Business slide. And so in 2018, I went to, as a photojournalism student, I went to volunteer at the National or World Folklore Day celebration. And I came to the realization that there were other symbols apart from the craft symbols. I was very curious, and it was time for us to also do our project work. I wanted to do my project work in photojournalism. But when I came there, I said, let me do something for my culture. In other jurisdictions, I should say I'm a Ghana, because I've spent almost all my life here in Accra, except 2 years, which I spent in my infancy. But I stayed with my parents, first with my mom and my dad. And so I've taken that culture along with me. And so I decided to do something. I decided to do my research into it. And so my project topic with my colleagues was the knowledge of our symbols among Ghanaian journalists. And so I looked at media houses, which I thought were very cultural sensitive, including the state broadcaster, and then I went to Voter Star in Voter Region to look at their knowledge based on the Ewe symbols. And I had a hypothesis that not a lot of people knew about the Ewe symbols or the Adanjesu, and I had to prove that hypothesis. But also, I did a comparative analysis. I also included some Edinkra symbols to know if people knew about it, and had a hypothesis that people knew more of the Edikra symbols. But much to my surprise, they didn't really know the name of these Edikra symbols. They could understand, they could see that these were Edikra symbols, but the name were very difficult for a lot of people. Please, next slide. Yeah, so during my project, one of the Edikra symbols I used was this symbol that was used in the 2019 Independence Day celebration, which is the Obinkombi symbol. And this Independence Day, until this year, for some years, the Independence Day were rotated across the regions. So Ghana has 16 regions, so they were rotating. So this year, in 2019, it was in Tamale. And it was sent there also to celebrate the peaceful conflict resolution. It was some chieftaincy issues. So they used this Obinkombi symbol. And it's an Akan symbol. Even though the Dinkra symbol is very popular, my argument was that you are going to a place which was dominantly a non-Akan area, and you're using an Akan symbol, and you are designing a logo to communicate in a certain context, especially for them to understand, okay, this Independence Day, we are to celebrate the peaceful coexistence people have had. And you use an Edinkra symbol. How much would the indigenous understand this symbol and even the name? And even when I looked at this symbol with the people in Accra, which is more of the headquarters of major media houses, including the state broadcaster, they didn't really understand it. And I felt that if Accra, which is cosmopolitan, urban, and the headquarters of media houses, most of them couldn't really understand the meaning of this symbol, even though there was some period down when the logo was unveiled. How much more the people in the northern region, Tamale? Meanwhile, we have other symbols. It doesn't really have to be proverbial symbols. It doesn't really have to be symbols that are very visual. It can be things around them, their culture. And so these paintings on my right are by people of the Upper East region, Sirigu women. They have wall paintings. So even if you don't have symbols from Tamale or Northern region, Northern Ghana, using a symbol from Upper East could mean something to them. And also these symbols, these wall paintings by Sirigu women also extend to Southern Burkina Faso. And so we're looking at African design transcending artificial boundaries created by the colonial people. And so we're looking at African design, even though we are saying that we're also heterogeneous, we are looking at designs that transcend borders or symbols that transcend borders, because spoken languages also transcend borders in Africa. And so I continued advocacy. Even as I was doing my project, I realized that some of the symbols had just their literal meanings and did not have their symbolic meanings. And also, so I continued to research into these symbolic meanings. And also, I realized that until I went to that program, I didn't know of these symbols. And I knew that a lot of people also didn't know about these symbols. So I used what I had, social media, to educate people on the symbols. So every symbol I take, due to my experience with the Dinkra symbols, that a lot of people didn't know the symbol, or not even know the meaning of the symbols. Each symbol I take, I look at the meaning, I look at the stories behind the symbols, as I'll look in his work about the philosophies and the stories in our design, in the background of our design. So these symbols, the stories behind them. So I take each symbol one at a time. I'm not done with all the symbols yet. I don't know all the Adonjesiwo yet, but so far so good. What I know, I look at them. And so I advocate for its use also in personal design and also in national discourse. So in 2023, please next slide. In 2023, we had a big win where the Independence Day was had in Volta region, my region, where the Ewe ethnic group is dominant, and an Ewe symbol was used. An Ewe symbol was used. So this is a Sabala, and Sabala Nogugake Moleme. The onion may be rounded, but there are spaces in between, or there's a way to go in between it. So it's a symbol of individualism, coexistence, and tolerance. And as Yaw talked about creating communally, I also got a newer meaning of the symbol, which is more of, which also looks at conflict resolution, or like being able to resolve conflict, and every conflict, and no matter how difficult the conflict is. And so that was a win for us. And they did not just use the visual proverbial symbol, they also used the river Volta, which is in the first six. They used the river Volta, which is a very important river in Ghana. They also use Afajato, and the Afajato is the tallest mountain in Ghana. It's within the sixes. And I'm from where the Afajato is, Bledi Bogami. And so all these we could relate to the people and we could understand, because we are not saying that we are being ethnocentric or being tribalistic, but using designs in context. Like in context, when you go to a community, by looking at design, what are the symbols in that community that I can use? That is how our people used to communicate before slavery and colonialism. And then when you're reclaiming design, we need to look at these things, not just say, okay, this is the class symbols are the most popular. They're the only ones I know. So let me just, anywhere I go in Africa, when I use the class symbols, they will understand. No. So there've been more progress. There've been use of the symbols in a lot of designers, artists have been using the R-edesignCollective or the R-edesignCollective, and in the national discourse too. Sometimes I have friends, I think I have a lot to do on my hand with terms of research and advocacy. But when we speak social media, they said people say that when you want somebody to hear something, you speak to the wind. And so I see social media as a wind where I speak and people listen. So please next slide. So recently, Ghana played the World Cup qualifiers. Please next slide. Ghana played the World Cup qualifiers. And so during the qualifiers, I wanted to go and check the scores. And to my surprise, I saw these symbols, this jersey. It was a training jersey. And I realized that they had not just the different symbols, they had the R-edesignCollective or the R-edesignCollective in them. They also had a Gansamai. And I saw it as a very proud moment and a progressive moment. And I later go to realize there was one of my friends who mooted the idea. He works with the National Commission on Culture, and they accepted it. So, and when you look at the lineup of the players, we realize that we have Asare. I don't know whether it's from Yaw's family. Yes, we had Asare. We also have Thomas Pate, who's a Gadangbe. So seeing the Gadangbe symbol or the Gansamai, and if it comes to know that these are symbols from his ethnic group, we imagine the level of pride and meaning that the Jesse would mean to him. And we also have Semenyo and Jiku, who are Ebriawo or Ebevio from ethnic group. And so donning this JC would also take on a different meaning to them. That, okay, the designer, the people, the organizers, like have their issue at heart in a very literal form in terms of design. Yes. So please, next slide. So look at different symbols from the ethnic groups in Ghana and Africa. So this is the Gansamai for the people of the Gan or the Accra people, the Gan Dangbes. So these are the Gansamai. I think we'll look at them later after the conversation. So these are the Gansamai. This next slide. Then we have the Adire symbols, which are, you can see a lot of them in the Adire cloth of the Yoruba people. So as they design these Adire cloths, you see the designs in them and they have meanings. And the next slide is at the Insibidi symbols of the Igbo people. They also call it as writings. And so they also have meanings. And so if you're an Igbo person or you are designing for an Igbo audience, you can explore these designs. And then the next slide are in the Ndebele paintings from the people of South Africa, especially the Zulu people, and also people of Northern Zimbabwe. And so these wall paintings too, they are very symbolic. They have symbols in them that you can explore in your design as when you're looking at African design, so that you're not looking at just one language or one visual language or one visual symbol of Africans. We're looking at design in Africa or designing Africa, or when we want to look at as African designer, how we can look at the broader scheme of work. Please, next slide. So these are the Bongolan symbols from the Mali people. So they also have their textiles. So most of these symbols are in textiles and in wall paintings, and especially with the Adam JCO that we'll look at later. So when looking at the textiles, and as a designer, whether you are into architecture or into any other thing, you can see a lot of symbolisms and then culture in the textiles of Africa. And so last but not least, that is the Odogu, the Dinkra symbols, which are like the symbols among the accounts, and not just in Ghana, but among the Baoulé people of Cote d'Ivoire. Yeah. So please, next slide. So recently, Ghana had the first, and I think we should all clap ourselves that Kente has become Ghana's first geographic indication product. And so whenever you want to get authentic Kente, you should come to Ghana. Yes. And so this is a cultural artifact that we own. But there was a bit of, they wanted a bit of Hula Valley, but I was preparing for this presentation. I couldn't enjoy. Sometimes I can be petty, because sometimes people will be like, okay, their accounts are very dominant, not just in population, but in voice. That is okay. You people, have you heard a more Kente that has been recognized? You people should not come near. But so I don't know whether it's just Bore Kente, but they just say Kente. And so when you look at next slide, we have Kente from the Ebriawo, or the people of the Volta region. So it's not just the Ebriawo, the people of the Gandagbe too are in Everland. So these are went to Agoten Petoe. And these are also Kete. We call them Agbamevo. Agbamevo means clothes woven at the loom. Yes. And so this particular Kete, Agbamevo, are called Adanvo. And that's where the Adan Jesu got inspiration from. So this Adanvo contains pictograms And so they are more different from the Ashanti Kete. So Ashanti Kete has a lot of geometric signs or symbols, but the Kete has a lot of pictograms, and these pictograms or symbols have meaning, and they are from proverbs, they are from folklore, they are from music. And so that's where the Adonjesu was also from music, from folklore, from proverbs. And so the next slide is also more of the Evekete. So that's Minister of Tourism, Art and Culture on my left in the Evekete. And on my right also traditional and foreign liberation also in the Evekete. And most of them have names. Most of the Evekete have names, but now due to lack of education, those names are getting lost. Yeah, so we need to revive it and to have a level playing field for all the, maybe the Kete in Ghana and the textile in Africa. So I'll look at other textiles. Kindly go to the next slide. A few textiles in Africa. We have in Ghana, we have the smoke or the batakari, which is more of the people of the northern regions. Then we have some of the Baule Kete. Then we have the Bongala designs from Mali. We have the Popo designs, which are similar to Evekete. And they give credence to the Evekete that some of their people keep in Keta. And so we're looking at the weaving culture of Africa. It's very broad, and most of us have one or similar migration route. So we have taken our culture, visual culture, our design culture, doing our migration. So sometimes we need to be careful ascribing certain design or certain designs to one specific culture. That we sometimes we need to own it, but not just own it in that way. And also, you'll be surprised that some of weaving culture is not only also specific to Africans. Other people also have weaving culture, and that shows how we can come together as designers in the world. And so, coming next slide, I think one people, I'll talk about the power of storytelling, and we need to tell our stories, especially as designers. And one people like can really praise for very good storytelling at their accounts, especially with the use of digital media. They are owning their narratives. Yes. And so even as Africans in other parts of our geography, we need to also tell our story. We need to tell our visual story. We need to tell the philosophies behind them. And so I'd like to tell maybe one or two stories about some of the Adonjesu that I look at. Please, next slide. So this is Indasese. It's a symbol of cautiousness. It's from the proverb, Indasese gake agamadona fuayin bleu. It says that the ground may be strong, but the chameleon walks on it carefully. So there's a song, it said what? Ayingba gake agamadona fuayin bleu. Ayingba gake lo agamadona fuayin bleu. So there is a creation story from that is among Ewes and the Yorubas. That's when Olodumare or Mausogbolisa was creating the world. This world was void with water all over. And so when Olodumare or Mausogbolisa was creating the world, he sent the hen to go and scatter earth on the waters. So after the hen went to scatter the soil on the waters, Olodumare or Mausogbolisa sent the agama or the chameleon to go and check if the hen has done a good job. That was to walk on the earth to see if it was very solid. So let's talk about the agama or the chameleon as an engineer, as a construction engineer, like a quality survey. Yes. So if we say that even if the chameleon who came on earth to realize that if the earth was solid, he went to report that the earth was solid, but it's still cautioning us that even though the earth was solid, we need to work on it carefully. So in situations, you may think that, oh, it's okay, but we need to navigate this world with cautiousness. So that is the story behind this Anyigbasese symbol. Yeah. So you have the Agama cycle around the world. So please, next slide. And so this is Jinu Jezi, the symbol of womanhood. So when I was looking at this symbol, I knew that Jinu was moon. And so, but I also still want to research. So when I went to research in the language guide by the Bureau of Languages, I saw moon as Leti, and I got confused because I knew moon as Jinu. It was later I realized that Leti is Vedome. And come to think of it, I'm Vedome. So there are different dialects among the Ewe people. I'm Vedome. But the first thing that came to my mind was Jinu, which is among the Anglo people. And even though I'm Vedome, I stayed in Accra, and I've also had relations with people of different dialects among the Ewe people and also other ethnic groups. So it broadens my mindset. And so this symbol, if you say this is Jinu, a Vedome person, a typical Vedome person may not understand, but an Anglo person can relate fast. And so the Jinu J means the moon coming, like the moon, like the moon coming out, like the new moon. And in Vedome, when a woman has a menstruation, they say it means she had gone out of the house. And so when in the older Ewe cultures, when you are menstruating, there's a special place for you to have, so that in terms of hygiene. But now when you're menstruating in your house, there are hygiene products. So that's where the Edolapeme comes from. But the Anglo people take it from, they say, Eko Jinua, have you seen your moon? So they say, like, seeing your moon is you are menstruating. And in other cultures too, the moon is related to womanhood or menstruation. In, I think, Greek or Latin, moon means mens, and it's where the month is from. And then we have menses, which is, related to it. And in the middle of the month is where women, the full moon, usually when women ovulate. And so in places where women usually use natural light, it's been reported that the moon has a lot of influence on their menstrual cycle. And so looking at how African philosophy or African knowledge also explains phenomenon in the world. And so imagine that you're an African child or an Ewe child and you're talking about Junua, it will have more meaning to her as a woman having a menstruation, that she's able to relate to the moon, the month, because in Ewe culture or cosmology, we have 13 months, and each month is 28 days. And the normal or the average menstrual cycle of a woman is 28 days. So we do the math and realize that our people are not far from right. Business slide. And so I'll talk about cultural misappropriation, that even as we invite the world to come to Africa and explore African culture and our symbols, and even as we, as Africans, as we reclaim our culture through our symbol, we should be aware of cultural misappropriation, that we should not just use any symbol or any cultural artifact just because we want to, all right, okay, just because we want to design, but because we want to speak. And then I think maybe let me just use 3 minutes to go through the slide. So looking at communicating culture, next slide, communication culture, that our culture should go beyond a beautiful culture, African culture, or Vodou, that sometimes we talk about my tribe, that, okay, anything we could do is called Vodou. And we also talk about the influence of the church, next slide, the influence of the church in our African culture, but realize that the church is currently coming in. So we see idiosyncratic symbols or designs in the church now. And they're looking at the next slide, African philosophy, looking at communitarianism over individualism. I thought that I think other people are very religious. So I thought I would see a lot of religious symbols, but I saw most symbols look at as spirituality, that how are we as a community, how we relate with each other. Yes, so most of our designs are very communal in nature, or our symbols are communal in nature. So he talked about, I think the next two slides talk about gender, and I think about myself as a woman looking at these symbols, not just as a woman, but I realized that some of the symbols may be misogynistic. And so as a woman, I'm able to control the narratives. Yeah, so next slide, looking at, next slide. So looking at different cultures that even we design in Africa, symbols in Africa, we also take from other cultures. So not looking at imposing just African cultural design on the world, but we want to understand that we also take from other cultures. So this is the Obinkombi symbol I looked at earlier on my left. And the right is a Pisces symbol, the zodiac sign. And they look very similar, but I don't know which one came before which. Yeah, so I think he talked about education. I think somebody else, I think our brother from Cameroon talk more of the education. Next two slides, we talk about education. So I use social media as like a way to educate, and from my little corner. Next two slides, I think so, or next slide. So we have TikTok. We're looking at what can I know of these symbols? How can I know about African culture? I think social media is decolonizing conversations, and apart from being a classroom, social media is bringing the clock to the street, that the clock to town, or the gown to town. They're able to understand these things, but not just take words on social media, look like a thinker. They're able to do our own research, also do more research into the things you see on social media, the things we see in the classrooms. Most of the researchers are there, but they don't bring it out in the open. So as designers, go to the schools, go to the research department, and you see a lot to explore there. All right, so I want to end with a word by Nelson Mandela, and he said that if you speak to a man in your language, it will go into his head, but if you speak to him in his language, it will go into his heart. So as designers, let's look at contextualizing our design and looking at how we can bring back the conversation and reclaim our cultures through our designs. Thank you so much. Akpe.
Thank you so much, Adenya. This like I think I already told you before. I'm in love with this presentation. It was so enlightening. It was amazing. Like I've learned so much myself. This is something I've been wanting to learn. This is giving me such an opportunity. Just the richness in the visual systems reminded us that design begins with cultural codes, the shared science and languages that shape our identity. And you really just like how you went about describing even the storytelling, the singing, the music, and everything. Really, like this is who we are as Africans, how we tell our stories, how we our identities. It was so powerful. It's made me emotional. So you really reconnected with aesthetics, with the heritage. You position the storytelling as a form of design knowledge. It's impressive. Thank you so much, and we'll circle back and we'll do a reflect. We'll do a Q&A, and then we'll do a reflection on what we've discussed today. So we'll quickly go to our next presenter, who is Arnold. Arnold. He's joining us from Cameroon. Just find Arnold's slides. Oh no, I'm sharing the wrong thing.
I'll share from here. I
Ah,
think
okay,
if
sure.
that's okay.
Thank you.
All right. Let me try. If it doesn't go, then
Yeah.
then you can share from your end. Let me see. Contents. Okay, I think you can share from your end.
Yeah, let me just.
I don't know what's wrong.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Yeah. I think
So you can just move to slide 2.
Yeah.
I actually work with the theme and color system of the events.
Yeah, yeah, I think you really helped me in designing. Yeah, yeah, okay. So just, yep.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. I don't know if everyone can unmute their mic. I'd like to greet everyone. I'd like us to greet ourselves in my dialects from Balinyonga, the northwest region of Cameroon. So when you say good morning, we just stick with good morning. When you say good morning, you say Ulanzi, then you answer back Usani. So I'd love for everyone to unmute their mic so we can greet ourselves. I'll say Ulanzi, then we'll all respond Usani. All right, are we ready?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is everyone ready? Everyone in the house.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so when I say Ulanzi, you respond back Usani. Ulanzi.
Osan.
Honey.
Sani.
Thank you guys, Usani. Thank you guys so much. So, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be here with you. Oh yeah, you can move to slide 2. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are right now. I am Arnold Sigala, co-founder and creative director at U-Levels Cameroon, and I'm really happy to be here with you. So my presentation is on reclaiming and reimagining the future of African design with focus on creative practice, entrepreneurship, and cultural leadership. I'd like to say I didn't find design really. Design found me. Before I ever opened Photoshop for the first time or designed a logo, I saw design in many different ways. I saw design in the way my aunt wove colorful threads into beautiful traditional fabrics, in the rhythm of colors, our local markets, in the geometry of our houses, both old and new, in storytelling and of our music and dances. These are things that I grew up exposing myself to, and I saw designs in all of these different things. Design for me has been how we interpret our surroundings and how those interpretations actually form us. In Cameroon, precisely, or I would say in Cameroon in general, we have different tribes. We have, I think, over 240 ethnic groups, different cultures, different people, and that's why Cameroon is called African in miniature, because we have different people with different cultures, different ways of doing things. I don't know, I think I spoke with Yaw Asare sometimes ago, and I was like, if you are able to succeed in Cameroon, you can succeed anywhere in the world. Because if you're doing business in Cameroon, you have to be able to please all these different people from different backgrounds, different tribes, different cultures. And so, as a young Cameroonian, I grew up with all of these. These different tribes create different types of music. They build different kinds of systems. They speak differently. They dance differently. And one thing I love about Cameroon is the fact that we are all exposed to all of these different cultures. So design for me, like I said, it has always been on how we interpret our surroundings and how those interpretations actually form us. That's why when I think about the future of design, really, I imagine something ancient embedded in my foundation as an African, something rediscovered, reimagined, and reclaimed. Okay, yeah, we can move to the next slide. So we're going to be looking at reclaiming authorship, right? For many years, probably centuries, the story of design has been told from elsewhere. Till today, I mean, it's still being told from different spaces. We study design systems from Europe, the United States of America, and other developed countries around the world. We look at tools, theories, and case studies that rarely speak to our realities as Africans. The problems that we face, the challenges that we face on a daily, those things rarely speak to us. And somehow we start to believe that design excellence exists out there and not here in Africa. However, Africans have always been designing. Our ancestors built visual languages from the CBD symbols in Nigeria to the Andika symbols in Ghana, just like our sister actually shared. Our craftspeople really understood proportion. They understood colors. These are people who understood rhythm, harmony, and design thinking long before all of these words actually became global words and formalized today. If you look at my screen, you see the work of African design. Today we talk about product design. Today we talk about prototypes. Today we talk about testing and all of this. These are things that our ancestors actually did in the past. These are things that they were rooted in. Today we talk about global words like human-centered design. These are people who understood human stories, who understood building products to solve problems in their communities and their localities. We are looking at all of those things as new words. We're looking at all of those things as words from Europe, words from the United States, but our Africans actually built products that some of them, we still have them today. If we visit some museums in Europe and America, we still see some of these designs that our ancestors actually designed. Well, what is design thinking? It's putting humans at the forefront of the problem you're solving. And our Africans actually understood that. Is it craftsmanship? You can see the picture here, which I'm displaying. You can see the passion, you can see the intentionality behind what our ancestors were crafting. And every element that they crafted through the products that they designed, it was like a means of storytelling for them. Through our architectures, products, we can see, some of the combs designed here. We can see some of the thrones here that were designed. And we talk about collectiveness. These are people who understood what it means to work collectively as a team. If you look at the picture on my right hand, you see these women, these African women designing. These are people who understood that in order for our story to be told, we need to come together and tell that story. They understood all of these things. Today, we make it seem like they are new. Today, we make it seem like it's something new that is coming into Africa. It's not something new that is coming into Africa. These are things that have been in Africa. These are things that our ancestors worked with. Human-centered design. Products back then were durable. They were designed products that were durable because why? They tested it. They ran prototypes and all of those things. They tested all of those things. They understood all of these things before all of these words, from design thinking to harmony to color systems and proportion, before all of these words actually became formalized today. Our ancestors already understood all of these things. From the furniture designs that they created, all of these different systems were embedded in their designs. Our oral traditions are design systems which include sound, movement, and our story. So what am I saying here? What I'm saying is, when I say reclaiming authorship, I mean taking back the right to define what is design, and who gets to call themselves a designer. And I'll say we are not consumers of creativity. We are not consumers of creativity. Because right now, a lot of people think Africans are consumers of creativity. We are not consumers of creativity. We are the authors of culture. We are the authors of culture. And the future of design will only be complete when Africa stops asking to be seen and starts positioning herself as the continent that founded and inspired modern design. Yeah, please to the next slide. Let's take a few seconds to actually reflect on this. We are not consumers of creativity. We are the authors of culture. We are not consumers of creativity. Africa, we are not consumers of creativity. We are the authors of culture. I want us to take that in. I want every one of us to take that in. We are not consumers of creativity. We are the authors of culture. We are the authors of culture. Okay, on to the next slide. We're going to be looking at reimagining creative process. At U levels, where I work as a creative director, we have made this our daily practice. We ask ourselves, what does design look like when it starts from us? When the brief begins with our stories, our languages, our textures, and our communities. Reimagining creative practice means refusing to design for trends and instead designing for the people in our community. It means building from context, not just concepts. It's not about adding an African pattern to a poster, really. It's about telling a visual story that connects with our culture, which guides every one of us as designers, our design process. I have a case study before me. One of our brand identity design projects, Yoruba Basic, an online Yoruba language school based in Chicago, they approached us for an identity design at U levels. We approached the project by first understanding the history of the Yoruba people, the culture and the origin of the language. As visual storytellers, we made sure every brand element that we crafted for this identity design represents both the Yoruba people in Nigeria and the Africans in the diaspora interested in connecting to their African heritage through the language. So you could see all of the elements that we actually created. We brought all of these elements from the Andrika symbols, the Simbidi symbols from Nigeria. We brought all of these elements into modern design. We were not designing for trends. We're designing for context. And this is the brand identity that we actually crafted. I just put some few, images here so we could actually see. We actually brought culture into modern design. It's not about putting African patterns. It's really about designing for context. And so all of these elements are embedded into our modern design. All of these elements are embedded into Yoruba basics. We did a lot of research. We spoke with Yoruba people to understand them, who they are, where they are coming from, their story, so that we could actually bring that into our modern design. Today we talk about modernism. Today we talk about minimalism and all of that. But how do we infuse African design into our today's modern design as we design for brands, as we design for businesses, and as we design for different scenarios? How do we infuse Africa into our modern design? That's the creative future we all believe in. That's the creative future you believe in, I believe in, where design becomes a way to document who we are and not imitate someone else's beauty or ideas. On to the next slide. We're going to be looking at entrepreneurship as cultural agency. Creativity alone is really not enough. It's really not enough. As Africans, we have to build systems that allow creativity to flourish. That is where entrepreneurship becomes very essential. For me, entrepreneurship in design ecosystem is about building cultural infrastructure. When we build creative agencies like U levels, collectives, and studios, we are building platforms that will carry African voices into the world. We are building economic systems that honor creativity as labor, not as a hobby. African design entrepreneurship must be about sovereignty, not about survival. We must own our narratives. We must be audacious because all of these things have been there. Our ancestors laid the platforms, the foundations. It's not new. So with all the modern design agencies, studios that we create, we are working with all of those things as our foundation. Our work and our value chains. Because the moment we own our creative economies, we also own the future of our culture and, of course, the development of Africa. So to my screen, you could see our creative process at U levels. It's a whole process when working on brand identity, when working on design projects. Every element that we create are crafted by hand before taking to any software or any tool. We craft them first. We sit down, we analyze, and we ask, will this be able to tell the story? Will this be able to send the right message? On to the next slide. This is very important, very, very important. Cultural leadership, designing the narrative. In Africa, we have different perspectives about leadership. We have been painted different narratives about leadership. We just spoke about Cameroon this morning. When we talk about leadership in Cameroon, the only thing we think about is dictatorship. We think about people who don't want to give you access to grow. We think about people who are controlling. We think about people who are out there to boss you around. But is that what leadership in design is supposed to be? Leadership in the design industry should not be seen as authority, but as a vision for excellent designs in Africa. To me, cultural leadership means asking, how do we shape imagination? How do we design futures that our children can see themselves in? In my work as a design advocate in Cameroon, I've seen how one workshop, one mentorship program, one creative space can transform entire communities and the design industry. When we teach design from a place of pride, not imitation, we give young Africans permission to see themselves as creators of meaning and employment, not just as admirers and consumers of aesthetics. I've had the opportunity to speak in different events, different design meetups, and I'm really proud to say I'm proud of the design industry in Cameroon and what we are doing. Because before the creation of U levels, we had no design communities. We had young people who had no idea about what design is. But these are people that design is in their everyday activity. From the way they plan their day, it's by design. The clothes they wear, it's by design. The furnitures they use, it's by design. But all of these things were kept away from them. Reasons I really can't explain. But when we created U levels, we did not focus on just branding or designing for brands. Our community has been the center of our agency. Africa has been the center of our agency. Different meetups, different workshops, teaching design thinking, exposing the younger ones to design, mentoring, speaking in different conferences. Very intentional about what the future of design in Africa looks like, because we can't talk about the future of design in Africa, leadership in particular, without talking about the younger people, because these are the leaders of tomorrow. And African design needs to be embedded into every single thing that they do. So I would say leadership in design in Africa is not about having the best portfolio. It's not about having 1,000 likes on LinkedIn. It's not about having 100,000 followers on Instagram. It's not about having all of these things. It's about creating pathways for others to walk through. If you are a leader, you call yourself a leader in the design space in Africa, and you can't boast to say, this is how we are shaping the next generation of African leaders. I'm sorry, you can't call yourself a leader. Who is a leader? A leader is not about himself. A leader is about the people, what they are becoming. And that is the vision for excellence that we need to carry in African design. Design is not an individual act. Design is a collective vision, and we need to be very intentional about that. To the next slide. Reclaim, reimagine, and redesign. As we look to the future, we must remember design is a language of identity, memory, and power. Reclaiming design is reclaiming the right to tell our stories on our terms. Cameroon hosted the African Nations Cup some years ago, and our story was still told elsewhere. It's heartbreaking, really, really heartbreaking. The brand identity for the African Nations Cup was designed by another agency in the UK. When we have African studios, when we have African agencies, when we have African designers who are ready to tell our stories. But before us, our stories are still being told elsewhere. We need to get back that authority. We need to reclaim it. We need to reimagine it. We need to redesign it. Reimagining design is imagining futures that are rooted in us and tapped into to drive advancement and development in Africa. So, as African creatives, entrepreneurs, and leaders in the room, let's stop asking where we fit in the global design. Let's build systems, languages, and platforms that the world will continue to learn from. Because we are not just part of the future of design. We are not just part of the future of design. We are the past. We are the present. And we are the future of design. So, the next slide. I'll end with this quote. African design is not a relic of the past, but an innate power that propels us to innovate and develop Africa. Thank you. I am Arnold Sigala, Creative Director of U Levels. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arnold. That was so good. That was really lovely. I had some notes. I made notes. Sorry. Yeah, that was really lovely. Your practice, your creative entrepreneurship as a vehicle for leadership and transformation, the mention of younger designers and linking local aesthetics, that part really spoke to me very well. The mentorship you give to young designers. There's a lot of Africa has the most youthful population anywhere in the world, and there's a lot of us who would have who needed a lot of like mentorship, and you giving spending your time being generous with your time and your knowledge and sharing it with the youth. I think that's something which is very powerful. And yeah, I also the linking of local aesthetics, the Yoruba, the work you did with the Yoruba, it's like with the global creative industry reframed. And the last part, African design is not a relic of the past, but an innate power that propels us to innovate and develop. It speaks to me and really resonates really resonate. I really share in your passion. The way you even spoke with passion and with the energy, it shows, yeah, it was really powerful. Your words were very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing. We'll do the Q&A, and once again, we'll come back and do our reflection. And the next person is Dr. Kwame Boafo. He's also, yeah, you need to tell your, yeah, Dr. Kwame. Let the doctor come out.
Hi.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll find your slide. Are you okay with me sharing your slides, or you want to?
yes, do that, do that. And I just want to say thank you to Adenya. Thank you, Adenya, for singing, and
Yeah,
thank you for greeting us, because and I've been thinking of what I can do to, to keep up with this performative aspects of the presentation. And I'm like, oh no, maybe I will offer some form of interpretation to what happened with the singing and with the greetings. I think for most Ghanaian storytelling session, there's always that part where I think in Euro-American setting, it's called intermission. And during the intermission, people are allowed to go out to stretch their legs and take a piss and come back and all that. But in Ghanaian storytelling, the storyteller will just raise a song and then the others will join. It's a call and response song. So he will raise the song, the others will join. Sometimes the songs do have didactic meanings to it. Sometimes they extend the storytelling. And that is the way that the storyteller keeps the audience alive. It allows them to sort of be present and to be part of the storytelling session. And with the greetings, lately I've been researching into greetings, and I think that um, greetings are more or less like an ethical and social ritual. You know, it's like a small but significant performance that acknowledges our shared dwelling in space. And so, as we are all here from different parts of the world, I think Arnold did well to sort of greet us, to let us know that we do acknowledge our presence here. And even though we can't see each other, we still do acknowledge each other's presence. So, I will be talking from a performance studies perspective because I'm a performance studies researcher. I research more into rituals, and so I'll be speaking about rituals. And I think the conversations that has happened so far, there seem to be some form of similarities, and it's true for most African conversations. There seem to be a lot of similarities, even though there are diverse implications. And so I want us to think about it in this sense that even though there may be similarities, we also do have, you know, different understandings of things and all that. And before I begin, I would like us to, next slide, please. Let's see how it goes. Okay, so I would like us to write the word for design in our mother tongue. There is a link that yeah, is going to help me put in the group, and then we can log into. If we can get onto the link, we can just write it in the chat. Like, what is the word for design in your mother tongue? I'll just give us a brief moment for us to do this. If we can write it in the chat, I think the chat will be the best place to do it. What is the word for design in your, oh, okay, yes, the link is also there. What is the word for design in your mother tongue? Yes, Tazam, projecto, designer conception, imiwe, okay, concevoir, okay, seared, okay, right, right. Okay, so you keep the words coming. Keep the words coming. If there's no word, also you can just say uh, no word, or yeah. And I ask for us to write the word for design in our mother tongue because I believe that um for us to decolonize, we need to start from a place of language. And I think Ngugi wa Thiong'o it has been a proponent of this idea that language is memory. And so for us to decolonize, we must first of all tap into the language. We must sort of speak to what we are asserting to do. So to name is to remember, right? And so if you're able to name the thing that you are doing, it helps you remember. And in Wiki Wationgo asks us, what is in a name? Because for him, naming is also claiming. And the colonial project was a project of naming. It was a project where the colonizer gave names to things and then they claimed those things as being theirs. And so we'll have this person discovered that person discovered this. It was because they had the infrastructure to name, and in doing that, they sort of they silence the existing names that these activities or these projects have. And so to speak design through our own tongue is to return it to the body. It's also to return it to history. It's also to return it to the sacred. It's for us to acknowledge that the thing that we are doing has a specific connection with who we are. It links us to our persona, it links us to our ancestors, it links us to our tradition. And yeah, and like Yaw Ofosu-Asare said in his book, design shapes not just the products we create, but the minds we cultivate and the worlds we inhabit. So I believe that naming is such a way that it helps us to reclaim. It may not be, you know, like in a macro level of reclamation, but that symbolic gesture, that symbolic art is a way of inserting our own authorship in the works that we're doing in relation to design. Next slide. I think an interesting thing that Yao talks about in his book is he talks about the wound. And I think Gloria Ancedia, who is a Chicana feminist, writes about the wound. And she talks about the border between Mexico and America being the wound. And she says it's the place where third world countries grate against the first world and they begin to bleed. But again, she allows us to think about the wound as something that is not necessarily to be healed. She talks about the wound as something that can transform. And so if we are thinking about colonialism as a wound, we also have to think about it in, you know, in different ways, because Kwame Anthony Appiah, the philosopher, tells us that colonialism happened to us in different scales, in different spaces, and in different frontiers. And so for us to be able to decolonize, we have to think about it in different scales, different encounters, different ideas. And so, Ofosu-Asare talks about the idea of decolonizing as something that is psychological. And I believe that, but I also want to extend this idea of it being psychological. I want to think about it as embodied, because I feel that one of the projects of colonialism was to discipline the bodies. Colonialism sought to make our the bodies productive. It sought to make the bodies docile so that it can be used. And so our way of decolonizing or returning to the body or greeting ourselves to acknowledge our presence is for us to also return to our bodies. It's for us to say that we are here and we are going to be here. It's for us to insert our authorship, our sovereignty, and our authority in this narrative that we are seeking to talk about. So when we talk about decolonizing design, we are also talking about decolonizing the body. It is undoing what was trained into our muscles. It is our way of reclaiming movement. It is our way of reclaiming the way we sing, the way we talk, the way we speak. And even though we are speaking in English, I think it's Audre Lorde who asks, can the tools of the master dismantle the master's house? Well, we want to say to Audre Lorde that we have seen a crack in the master's house and we are going to chip it conversation by conversation. Of course, it may not happen in our time. It could happen in a lifetime, that this conversation that we are having is our way of sowing seed into this, you know, project of decolonization. So because I talk a lot about rituals and performance and all that, I see design as an embodied consciousness. And by this, I mean a consciousness that flows from the body. So design begins in the body. It is in the gesture of making, in the way the hand meets the material. So anytime when we are thinking about decolonizing and design, first of all, we need to think about how it feels in our body, how it relates to our body. And that is also our way of thinking about it communally, because the body remembers what has been designed into it. So to decolonize is, first of all, we remembering, and also it's a gesture of reverence, of labor, and also of relation. So to design then is to choreograph being. is to shape how the body meets the world. So it's not only in a psychological framework that decolonizing happens, it also happens in the way we embody things. And this leads me to the next thing that I want to talk about. Next slide, please, which is ritual as design practice. So ritual is one of the oldest design language. And I say this because ritual organizes time, space, and relations. So when people gather to dance, when people gather to do a naming ceremony, when people gather to sing songs, when people gather to do a festival, they are designing community. At the same time, they're also designing continuity. It is during these ritual practices that the younger generation gets to know where the older generation has been, where they are going, and the kinds of things that has instituted our society. So rituals is our way of embodying our own narrative. It's also a way of us to sort of reclaim our existence and also to bring ourselves into being. So through movement, through repetition, we are rewriting the colonial script of discipline and saying that we are here and we are going to move on our own terms. We are going to design our own terms. But what's interesting is that there's a lot of people who have been speaking about this idea of decolonization and some of the things that they talk about, and this is going to lead me to my next slide. There are a few African philosophies that is brought to bear, which is Ubuntu, and no, previous slide, which is Ubuntu and Sankofa. And I think this morning Adenya mentioned Ubuntu. And Ubuntu essentially is I am because we are, and it gestures towards interrelationality, it gestures towards community. And also Sankofa, which is the Akan philosophy, also speaks to the idea of returning and fetching. And these philosophies of design, it teaches us that design is relational. It teaches us that design depends on care, because Ubuntu speaks to the idea of me being because of the rest of us. It also teaches us about the idea of return, because Sankofa essentially is for us to go back to fetch. However, we have to be cautious about the ways that we use these design philosophies, right? Because we don't want to play into the idea of universalization, which is what a lot of Euro-American theories and philosophers seek to do. They create this sort of idea and impose it on every other existing knowledge. We have to tread cautiously, and Zimbabwe media and communication scholar Inyasha Imboshi, he cautions us in his paper, May the Real Ubuntu Please Stand Up. He tells us that we need to treat these philosophies with a lot of contention. We don't need to treat them as slogans or as manifestos. We have to tread cautiously the way we bring them into conversations, because Ubuntu has different meanings in different cultures. And so it's important for us to understand that even though these philosophies helps us to decolonize, it helps us to think about the African ways of doing things, we also have to think about it as a diverse idea. We also have to think about it as something that can be contested, because you don't want to project an African philosophy that seeks to project a utopian, because no, it's not everybody who was in the past that had a good standing with the system. It's not everybody who related equally in the system. And so we need to be cautious about the ways that we speak to, philosophies that enables us to design, so that it doesn't become essentialized. And I think this is something that Yaw talks about very importantly in his book. So it's important that as African designers, and as we are thinking through decolonization, and as we are seeking to draw on symbols, on philosophies, on ideas, on narratives that are situated within the African geography, we also have to think about it in a way that opens it up for criticism, that opens it up for contention, that opens it up for doubt. Because when we do this, we are sort of being vulnerable and saying that, well, we do know that these things exist, but we are also open to other ideas, because it's important for us to be very diverse in our thinking and all that. So next slide. So maybe I will talk about practical ideas. So how can we decolonize design? Because there's a lot of conversations about decolonizing, and a lot of designers spend time in the studio trying to craft ideas, trying to think through ways of doing things and all that. And recently, I've been developing a workshop, and the workshop essentially sort of deals with the idea of walking as a method, right? And it seeks to take the designer, the writer, the artist, the philosopher away from the classroom, because I believe that learning is not only situated in the classroom. Learning happens outside the classroom, because everything that we have said so far, there are lots of things that we didn't learn in the classroom. There are conversations that we had with our parents, conversations that came to us as a result of something that we observed on the streets or that we saw somewhere. And so in thinking through decolonization, we don't only have to bog ourselves down into the classroom, into the books. Let's begin to think outside. Like they said, let's begin to think outside of the box. Let's begin to think outside of the classroom. How can we tap into the knowledge of the market women? How can we tap into the knowledge of the farmer, their ecological system of farming? How does it influence our way of designing? How does it help us to sort of think in a very ecological, in a very diverse way? So let's begin to think outside of our studios and begin to bring in real life situations. And I think a few weeks ago, I was having a conversation with Yaw, and there had been a road construction in Ghana, and someone had just gone to the road to go and prepare their food. And we were thinking about it that, wait, when they were designing the road, what was the thinking that went into it? You know, because in most Ghanaian, and I want to say Accra homes, there's been a housing deficit. So most homeowners have turned their kitchens into bedrooms. And so everyday practices like cooking ends up in the open. And so for some of these people, when they saw this open space on the streets, they were thinking that, wait, this is a space for me that I can engage with my everyday activities. But of course, the designers didn't think about these people when they were designing the roads. And so it's important, it's very imperative for us to understand the lived realities of our people so that we can design their lived realities into our designs, because we are designing with and for the people. So next slide. And I love this quote from Sheikh Anta Diop, and I think it's also reflective on Yaw Ofosu-Asare's book. And it says that the African Renaissance will be achieved only when Africans, drawing on their own creativity, transforms their society. And I think this is very reflective of us to begin to think of what ways that we can think collectively, what ways can we think ecologically, what ways can we think relationally in our idea of designing, in our attempt to decolonize. What I have realized most of the time is that in our attempt to decolonize, we tend to use the existing framework, which is the Euro-American framework, and we begin to create, and then we drop something little to it. I'm saying is that we can begin to step back, think with the words that we inputted it as as the word for design in our mother tongue. And I am certain that if I ask everyone to speak about the word that you've put there is going to carry a story, it's going to carry a memory, it's going to carry a narrative. And so this idea of naming, it also returns us to a space to let us understand that sometimes the word design flattens the stories that associate the things that we do. But when we begin to speak about it in our mother tongue, it brings out, like it suddenly erupts this narrative, this storytelling, this abundant wealth of traditions, of culture, of knowledge that exists within the things that we are doing. So it's always important for us to think about these things in our design. And so um, the African, our rituals, our walks, our stories, these are designs, which is essentially what I'm saying. They are the blueprints of survival and of possibility. And I want to add, like Arnold said, they are also a blueprint for sovereignty. And so if we begin to think about these ideas, let's think in terms of relationality, let's think in terms of our lived experiences, and that should be the place where we start, the place where our bodies becomes a part of the things that we are designing, becomes a part of the stories that we are telling. And that, I believe, will flow communally, it will flow ecologically, and it will flow relationally. So let me see. Let's slide. I think that's the end of it, I think. Yeah. Maybe the last slide. Yeah, that's it. So thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, man, that was powerful. I really enjoyed the like it was so rich. I don't even know where to start with my short reflections. Those were very powerful. And ever since I met you, I've always like we've had two meetings. I've always reflected each time we have conversations about the work you do. It's so powerful, and the fact that you've taken what you're doing, like the performative act, and you've really looked into it through such a design, a very design, like reflecting it through a design perspective is so rich. The embodiedness, the way you talk about embodiedness, what did I write? The ritual performance, the embodied knowledge, like your religious possession, the even review design as lived philosophy, like and something performed, not just produced, like the way it's designed as part of the spiritual and communal life and grounded in rhythm, repetition, and ceremony. Those are very powerful. And thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for being generous enough to come here and just talk about these things. It was really powerful. I think the thank you so much, and join me to really give like if you can just say clap emoji of clap or heart just to say appreciation for all our presenters, not just Kwame so far. So the last but not the least, because we're gonna do a Q&A and then we'll come back and we do final reflections. It's Lawrence J. Okoth. He is a Ugandan designer from uh, borders, like borders of Africa, and he's going to close the sequence with a focus on human-centered innovation. He illustrates how design can respond to social and humanitarian challenges, turning empathy and collaboration into practical tools for transformation. So it's going to be another powerful presentation. So Lawrence, I think you sent your slide to me.
And I'll try to share from
Yeah.
here,
Yeah. Okay.
but I don't know if that's possible. So I'll just first try then,
Yeah.
because it's just easier with the pace.
Okay. Cool. Fine, and I get to.
Just let me know if you can see it when
Yeah, I can see it. I think everybody else can see it.
okay. Can you still see? And
Yeah, we can see.
Yes, we can see.
are
Yeah.
the slides shifting?
Nah, I think you need to go to view and then make it full. I don't know.
I think I'll stay maybe at this because I think from here. How about now?
We can you zoomed it, but we didn't see it move. Okay, yeah, it moved now. Yeah.
Okay, so it's present in this format.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me to share. I'll just introduce myself and then maybe take off the video just to save some bandwidth. With many appreciations to presenters before me for sharing very interesting lessons. I think just reflecting on what was being said and what was being shared, what was being shown, there's a lot to learn from the discussion that's happening right now. And so I hope that I can contribute something that will help us enrich, sort of the collective understanding on this topic. Like I was speaking before with Yao, I chose to reflect on the book, I think it's this African Design Futures, and specifically the chapter on on revisiting our consciousness in trying to create an African design language. Because as a designer, having practiced the last, I think it's now 11 years, this is something that I still think that I'm still trying to explore. And together with my team at Design Without Borders, this is something that we are constantly trying to answer is what exactly about our work is describing it as African, or at least as being relevant to the communities that we are designing for. We always try to keep that as a baseline, which is that is our work relevant? Are we responding to a need? So yes, so my name is Lawrence John Okoth. I serve at Design Without Borders as the Director for Design and Innovation. We have a fairly small team. And so I think some people might be missing or some people might be from the old team, but this is more or less the size of the team on most occasions, but also with very different backgrounds in architecture, mostly industrial design, urban planning, sociology, anthropology. Sometimes we invite, of course, partners that help us to expand these backgrounds. But speaking a bit more about what we do, I'll just say very briefly, these are some of the projects that we've done, and I'll just encourage each of us to have a look at the website to see in more detail what these projects are about. These are specifically the product design projects, and then these are more on the service design side of things, where things become a bit more intangible, but also mostly based on the improvement of infrastructure, the organization of people, and trying to see how some form of value proposition can be delivered by the service. I'll go very quickly into one of the first topics that you capture in your book, which is looking at decolonization as a very reflective activity, as an activity that demands that we look at what's happening within our subconscious. And I think for many of us young designers, it starts very, very early on. What you're seeing in this slide are some of the architects that inspire young designers from the very moment that you think of doing getting into architecture. These are some of the names that appear: Zaha Hadid, Daniel Libeskind, Frank Lloyd Wright. And so I started to hear those names maybe when I was about 15, 16 years old. And already that started to influence the way I saw architecture. I always thought, I think, Yao, you capture a quote in your book around the propagation of a single story. And I think that already for me was, I just thought all architecture had to look like, Zaha did, Daniel Libeskind, etc., etc. There's all these star architects with projects out there. And so in my first year, these are some of the sketches that I made for some of the projects that we were doing, which for me is a bit of a there's some success here, but there's also some failure because you already start with a baseline that's not owned by yourself. And so you're already trying to replicate. I did have an inclination towards lots of curves, as one can see, but also trying to explore things that are a bit more sort of rigid in terms of their design in terms of the design language. This is a project that happens a bit later, as we see now myself trying to combine a bit of this language, but still not really getting there. And then trying to incorporate some African design fabric as a sort of last resort. But this is again, the process that many of us were going through starting out in this course is you're trying whatever you can in order to understand how exactly you're seeing and understanding your culture and your way of expression, trying to find your language, which is another thing that's also encouraged in architecture school, at least here in Uganda, is this idea that you should have a language, an individual language. You should have a style, which goes against, I think, Kwame and Arnold sort of spoke about this. Is the philosophy of Ubuntu, which is that it's the collective rather than the individual. These are sketches from much more recently. We still see an attempt to explore, but I think there's a lot that can be still attributed to design languages that exist. Although I think it's also difficult to expect perfection. But for me, these sketches here I think I love them because they start to give me the feeling that I could look at design in a way that's completely different from the way I looked at design as an architect. So that's the sketch to the left is I wouldn't even say a building, but it's sort of an urban space that's inspired by a staple. So you can see the staples at the top there. There's another interpretation based on wood that has been sort of chewed into by say termites, for instance. And then the last one at the bottom on the right, that's based on, I call them sound beams. But I remember also joining architecture. I was very interested in the way trees respond to wind that's blowing through over the landscape. And for me, I thought that architecture then could exist without necessarily having buildings. So that's at least an idea that I thought I could maintain through some of these sketches. This happens later at master's level, just trying to reinterpret the African kitchen as a place of conversation, as a place of warmth. But again, introducing this opening at the top that could easily represent, that could have easily been a fireplace back in the day, but also opening up the building and saying that it doesn't necessarily have to be closed. We can see some of the nature creeping and also be celebrated as it would be if you had dinner outside rather than inside.
Sorry, hello. Sorry,
Can you hear?
Lawrence. Sorry, Lawrence. Sorry to cut you short. We can't see your screen if you're sharing it. Sorry.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to hand it back to you. I think it might not work, so maybe
I can see his screen from my end. I don't know. I'm following, so I can see. I think others can see his screen as well. So I'm sure
you can see. I've been seeing the screen.
Yeah, same here. I can see it too.
Yeah, we can see your screen.
Yeah, we can see your screen. Maybe, is it Thomas? Maybe, do you want to change your view or like how you are viewing the presentation?
Might want to sign out and sign back in, maybe. Maybe
Yeah,
that will
I
help.
can see.
Or make
all right,
sure
thank
you
you.
clicked on Lauren's screen at the top. There, you can be clicked into meeting or you could be clicked into his screen. So make sure you're clicked into his screen at the top.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so moving very quickly. Yes, so from all of this experience, again, this is still just the attempt to explore what African design could look like. And even at this moment, I can't say for sure that I know exactly what African. I mean, I love Kwame, what you're talking about, looking at ritual as a form of practice, design practice. I think is probably one of the newer ideas that I'm now very, very sort of excited to explore. But at this moment, this is about 8 years ago, it still wasn't clear. But I think moving on, joining Design Without Borders is one of the things that helped me at least understand, and I think I said this before, is that design is I think it's easier to understand African design, at least for myself and my team, while speaking about relevance to context. And Arnold, you spoke about how many of these practices have already existed for a very long time in Africa. But, we really start to appreciate, or at least when I joined, I really started to appreciate the understanding of design being by the user and with the user rather than for the user. So at the top here, you can see the experts sort of, separate from the client or the user, the beneficiaries, as they say in Africa. But then that now starts to move with all these methodologies around participatory design, design thinking, human-centered design, which I agree have already existed for a very long time here. And we now start to see that the designer can in fact be a bit more involved with the beneficiaries, and maybe in future with the coming of AI and all of these tools that people can use to do design, maybe the designer then starts to become a mentor of a process rather than having to be. So you can see in this illustration, he sort of handed over the tools to the beneficiaries, to the users. So yes, so joining Design Without Borders, my design language starts to change. And I think, Yaw, in your book, you talk about reflexivity, humility, but designers having to be aware of their own biases, their own privileges. And so, for instance, in this image, I had the opportunity to design my own clothing rack, but I had no idea it was going to arrive like this on a motorbike. I was completely shocked by this. But yeah, I guess that was the transporter trying to save costs on their end, which is not something that I necessarily thought about, although it somehow worked. And not having so much, of course, to place on this clothing stand sort of applied it, for me, the idea of relevance to my situation and to my needs at that time as a young bachelor were completely met. But this is now ideas from Design Without Borders and working with the team over there starting to creep in. Just speaking very quickly about how we approach what we do. And this, I think, is important in today's design practice, at least on the continent. Arnold captured a lot of these things very extensively. Context immersion. This is a project that we're doing with fishermen in Tanzania, led by the RNLI, the Royal National Lifeboat Institute, where the aim is to reduce drowning deaths amongst fishers in fishing communities. So immersing yourself in that context for as long as possible in order to understand the challenges that they're going through. Understanding your users and profiling them as you should, highlighting the distinctions. Everybody is very different. And in this image, we can see very varied demographic. We can see it's in fact one family, but even within one family, you still have very many different types of users that might have different needs from what you're trying to offer as a value proposition. We love the idea of user extremes, which is in any situation, if you cover the extremes, if you design for the person that's very likely to gain the most or gain the least, or if you design for the person that's least affected and the person that's most affected, you're very likely to cover the spectrum in between and sort of cater to the needs that most people might have. Applying methodologies such as positive deviance inquiry, which is essentially in every community, there's going to be somebody that's, while everybody might be facing a challenge from a situation, there's also going to be somebody that's actually thriving within the same community with the same resources. And so what does that boil down to? It's about investigating what allows someone to approach things differently from others. Context and journey mapping. So now trying to understand what the user's experience is and really trying to document very, very extensively what that situation is. And then later, of course, this allows you to start to respond. But while responding, allowing the community to have the opportunity of declaring what the priorities are. So this is again in the fishing community. Most of these images are from the same project. This is again working with the fishers in Tanzania in trying to understand what exactly they would prefer to have on life jackets. At least in this case, it was about life jackets. I think from here we can see that the whistle on a life jacket is very important. The reflector, which is the one at the top, we can see the prices that people would pay for incorporating some of these features. So these are voices. Here we are attempting to capture very directly and in a very tangible way the voices of the community and the users of products we want to develop. And then getting into extensive prototyping. I'll just move a bit faster. Role playing. We are doing a similar project in Uganda. Also within fishing communities and trying to reduce drowning deaths. This is an exercise that we performed in one of the districts that we are targeting, where we carried out a role play to understand within different scenarios, how do people respond, and therefore trying to see if we could think of an emergency response mechanism to these situations, or even direct interventions to prevent such things from happening. So I'm just looking at this, Yaw, you talk about the designer as a cultural translator and a healer. I think what this image brings to mind, at least for me, is that aspect of healing is most communities are going to have challenges that we don't foresee. And so once the designer gets, once the designer joins the discussion, it's often important that you're sort of facilitating a conversation around topics such as, the need to heal from past traumas, the need to create new bridges, the need to create partnerships between communities, with organizations, with government. And that always comes out very strongly when we see a role play, because a role play helps us to act what happens in real life. Co-creation with community, I'll just move a bit faster. And then finally, building prototypes that allow us to even do some further testing. This is a project we did with the Makerere School of Public Health, which is a government agency. The aim here was to reduce incidences of injury amongst children under 2 years old. What we see here are some sketches. We have exercises that we carry out at the office where we develop as many ideas as possible, and then take these ideas to the community for them to vote and to, again, prioritize. It's always very, of course, as a designer, once you try to go with as many ideas as possible to the community, because there's a very, very high chance that many of them will be rejected by the community. But for us, this is an experience that helps us to narrow down on ideas that are more relevant for the community. So this particular project involved, we worked very, very extensively with the community. So you can see in some of these images us trying to source fabrics from local traders, us interacting with artisans in the image over here. I think you can see my cursor. Trying to use local materials, trying to borrow from ideas that already exist. I think, in my opinion, this is sort of the idea behind Ubuntu, and I'll say Ubuntu now instead of human-centered design, because of what Arnold and Kwame pointed out. I think the more your practice can be embedded in what's already existing. So essentially in this image, there's nothing new that the Design Without Borders team was creating. So the more you can embed those ideas in what's already existing and the history and sort of the context, the more I think that one can arrive at solutions that might then be classified or might come closer to what we could call an African language. This is us checking those ideas with the community and then going through some of the prototyping, again, utilizing preservation methods that already exist. This is cow dung that was smeared on some of the earth-based interventions, products that we're developing, working with artisans from within the community or from communities that are within reach, and then hearing from the community what their preferences are. Again, this is very, very important. Is at the end of the day, have participants that represent the demographic or the diversity of users that you're really trying to respond to. And so in this image, we have many of our direct beneficiaries were mothers, so mothers with children under 5 years old. Sorry, I think I said 2 years old earlier. But also artisans. So you can see the artisans over here. They've made these products, and I remember in this case, the mothers, the guardians were also mentioning what prices they would pay for these products and which ones they preferred. So it was a bit of there was some tension in the workshop, but then it quickly resolved as people started to understand each other. And we were there mostly to facilitate that conversation. Something that, Yaw, you mentioned also in your book is how do people see themselves from the act of making? And I think this comes back to the consciousness, to the decolonizing the mind. And it's not, I think you say this, it involves shaping not products, but the mind. When you look at these products, you don't typically think of them as design products. And that's something that we treasure in many cases, because it's more about, it's not always about the aesthetic of the outcome and how refined and how mainstream the outcome is. I think for us, the process has always been very valuable, the conversations that happen there. Of course, while still focusing on the fact that you have to respond to a challenge. There's a quote I love so much. Presenters here have sort of alluded to this same thing, which is that the Global South is not necessarily forging a new path, but really trying to remember who we were already. And based on that, there's a lot of history that can be shared. I won't go through this history in detail, but from the carvings that existed way back, the Great Migration that happened all over the continent and the exchange of cultures, technologies that already existed, such as iron smelting, and these towers are really amazing to study. The rock paintings. We have history that is very supportive of our, I guess, effort to continue expressing ourselves in a genuine way. But we also have painful history. We have history that takes us back. And I think that's why we're having this conversation. Slavery and the influence of industrial production, entire African communities that were transported away to work on cotton fields and in factories. Technology and ideas that were renamed and said to belong to somebody else. Here I'm talking about some of the, at least in this case, of course, not for Africa, but if we look at Kitengi, which is a common fabric in Uganda, and that coming all the way from Indonesia. So this was a challenge that cultures all around the world were facing and imposed by colonialists. Entire groups of men that were forced to join wars, and then all the way into, I guess, post-independence restructuring efforts that were not necessarily in favor of African economies and much more geared towards taking from our economies rather than giving back. I think this is the history that is in the way of us improving our ability to express ourselves. And so I think we need to be aware of this history, but then it also requires us then to tell the right stories and to bring out the stories that can actually help us re-understand our capacity, reframe our capacity. Here we are looking at architecture from Dogon culture, the Dogon culture in Mali. There's seasons in the year when women in the village come together to sort of repair their houses and to resmear, refresh patterns on houses. There are architects also who have managed to develop a language, and you can see projects here from architect Francis Kere. There's very many projects that he's produced that really help us start to imagine what African architecture could maybe look like. But there's a lot of room for exploration. I think every designer has to really sort of allow themselves to discover, but still remembering that there's this philosophy that it's not about the individual. It's about the community, and the more you can do that, the more you can arrive at a language that is close to what we could call African. Even complex interventions like this, if you read this book on African fractals by Ron Aklash, I think you'll find very interesting details there that help you realize that even technologically, Africans were already quite advanced, because now we see that such fractals being used today in modern 3D printing. This is a project that we did for we were developing a small exhibition. It was Uganda's first time participating at Dubai Design Week. And here what we decided to showcase was this really special fabric, back cloth. You might have heard about it. It's very common within a very specific tribe here in Uganda, and it's taken from the bark of a tree, and you have to beat the bark of the tree very, very, very extensively until you arrive at a fabric, like this. Very, very interesting material to look at online. The idea of storytelling, this is something that we do in most of our projects, is we try to, when we gather stories from the communities, we try to illustrate that, always really including aspects of the story that are as authentic as, that authentically represent what the values of that community are. I won't go into so much of the details, but you can see this project had to do with the transfer of weather information to communities. It still has to do with the drowning prevention. Here you can see the community announcer. You can see them interacting with people. You can see a gong being sounded in the community to alert people of an emergency, for instance. And then we are also trying to think through rewards for people that behave in a certain way. But then using those stories then to encourage some kind of intervention, to encourage the beneficiaries to think of how then do they respond. And I think this form of storytelling, at least within the design process, is very progressive. You go from a situation that exists to what a situation could be based on the interventions. Yeah, you also talk about critical engagement and the pursuit of justice. And designers, I always say designers should not shy away from conversations that involve politicians, that involve government. In the project with the fishing communities, we've had to do this. And we are very glad that the Ministry of Internal Affairs and the Police Department have been very happy to engage with us on topics, on issues that the communities are, mentioning, because there's very strong tension between the fishers and the marine police, for instance, who are always clashing on the lake. The fishers are fishing in areas that are not designated as fishing zones. And so there's a lot of clashing. But once we started these conversations, the government was very happy to join. We have very many meetings that allow us to speak to very many actors. You can see the police department here. Within the same photo, we have the Ministry of Health. We have the Ministry of Environment. I'm just trying to describe the players that are included in this particular photo. And then moving on to the role that designers have to play with regard to the environment, ecological transformation. How are we thinking about future generations? This is a project that took us into that realm. From this project, we've ended up doing a lot of design that has to do with urban farming. And urban farming, at least in the current context of the urban, like the urban spaces in Kampala, is somewhat difficult to carry out. But from this project, it was very possible for us to have that discussion with urban farmers that have tried, and then try to come up with products that might make it easier to perform some kind of farming for different housing typologies, different scales of farming. But this one had a very specific aim. It was to improve the consumption of herbs and vegetables, so for health reasons. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much for the opportunity again, and I will look forward to the discussion.
Wow, thank you so much, Lawrence. Thank you so much. You really that was so good. Everyone, like your work really deals with the practicalities of everything. You really showed how your 11 years experience really comes to bear when with everything you've done, your work with communities, how you use storytelling. These are like, while I was presenting, I was thinking about how do I bring all this into the classroom? How do I have these sort of conversations with my students and tell them how powerful design can be, because it's so powerful. Sorry, I think I've lost my notes, but this was really powerful, and I thank you so much for being generous and really open to sharing your work. I think we've had a very good mix of everything from Adenya's work to Arnold to Kwame to your work. Everybody presented a bit like more of their work, and it shows how there's a lot of synergies. There's also a lot of so much to learn from each one, and That was so good to hear. I think when we are, as we the Africans, if you are aware, we don't really stick to time, the linear notions of time and how we see time in the Western. It's not how we do things. So I'm sorry if you're going be we plan to do this for 1.5 hours, and it's obviously going to be more than 1.5 hours because it just I was enjoying it. I was enjoying the conversation so much. I didn't want to stop anyone's flow and tell them, you have this amount of time left. So I just let everybody flow. At this point, I just want to we're trying to have a bit of discussion. So we're going to allow, I think, 10 questions. If you'll be kind enough, either questions, reflections, or anything you want to share as part of your own practice, anyone. So just unmute your mic if you are comfortable. You turn on your video, and then a quick question, or you put in the chat, whichever one you are comfortable with, and then we could have a quick quick 5 or 10 questions, and we keep it snappy and quick so that we are able to finish. We know to finish quickly as people are. I'm in Melbourne and it's almost 10 p.m. So try as much as possible to. So I will. Okay, I have. If you can raise up your hand, do the hand emoji, and then I could call you out. So Gabriel, if your hand, I can see your hand up.
Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much, first of all, to all the speakers. All the presentations were amazing, and it was really interesting to see how they were in conversation with each other. I have a couple of reflections and then a question. A couple of things that stood out to me, like I already mentioned in the chat, from Dr. Boafo's, I hope I'm not butchering your name, from Dr. Boafo's presentation were the viewing gatherings, rituals, festivals as avenues to design community. And I've been doing a lot of thinking about intentionally designing experiences such as those learning experiences, communal experiences, especially for culture workers or creative practitioners across the continent and diaspora, where people can, spaces like this genuinely, where people can gather, learn, and inform each other's practice. So my question for anyone, any of the speakers, but maybe specifically your or Dr. Boafo, is do you have any advice for curating, organizing such experiences, whether those are like online workshops or like realistically, if because the focus for me is on bringing people from all around the continent and diaspora together, online seems to be the most reasonable frontier. So like, do you have any advice for curating experiences like this, learning experiences, education experiences, or apart from experiences, materials and community spaces where people can gather, learn, design community, design knowledge sharing experiences? Yeah, that's my question.
Thank you so much. Kwame, do you want to chime in and say something?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, I write and research about festivals. And so for me, the idea of festival in itself, it's a way to curate community. And maybe in your case, you're looking to sort of curate spaces, safe spaces, I would add, where people can share ideas. I believe that, I mean, like you mentioned, in this our present time, at least what COVID taught us is that we don't always have to be physically present. We can also have meetings virtually, and it can be possible. But I guess what makes the meeting, interesting or fascinating It's sometimes about the subjects that is being talked about, and also um, the people who are speaking about it. I mean, of course, it's important to open the space for everyone to share their idea, but my sense is that you could have, people with personal experiences that are related to the subject, people who have some strong conviction with the subject to sort of share and speak about their individual experiences, and that is a way for people to also learn. It is not always the case that we have to take from the books. I think it's Bell Hooks who talks about the idea of teaching to transgress, and one of the things that she's very passionate about is there's a thing she talks about, kitchen gathering or something like that, where we gather around the kitchen, we gather around food, and then we talk. And so these are ways that you can think about gatherings. It doesn't only have to be about presentation. Sometimes it can be that one person will take us through their recipes and then share it. People will be online, they will see, and then we can talk about it. So we find ways that we can, I don't want to use the word decolonize, but yeah, decolonize presentation, where it is not only academically informed, but it can be very liberal and also very organic in that sense. I hope I've answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. That was a really interesting answer. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take I think 4 more questions quickly, and then if there's one question in the chat, I think from Chris, who is asking, how do we rectify the European structures that help us visually communicate the great design systems with the need to remember our innate ability to communicate as done by our ancestors? Arnold, do you wanna, because you are the graphic designer, yeah, do you wanna speak? I don't know, because I've been
All right.
writing, I've been writing quite a lot about around what is good design, because
Okay.
the Swiss grid system helped about like good, but like I think the question goes to what is good design? Like what do you like? Would the grid make it necessarily good? Does it make it necessarily bad? How do we? Yeah, you Arnold, you go.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna be looking at it from direction of, first of all, when it comes to African design, like we said, or like I said in my presentation, it's not necessarily about having African patterns on maybe posters and flyers like you see at the level of graphic design, but it's more so really understanding the people that you're designing for. Because if we have to talk about what's good design and what's great design, really, I think good or great design is, first of all, putting the humans at the center of it, which I stretch on my presentation that this is what our ancestors have been doing for a very long time. We had products in the past that lasted for years. Some of us, we grew up using some of those things that were crafted by our grandparents, our great grandparents. Some they were still in the house. So it's really bringing humans at the forefront of everything that we create, because I still feel like, especially from the Cameroon community where I come from, we design things for trends. We don't design things for context. I think you are not the one to determine if a design really is good or great, but the users are the one, how the users use the design, how they interact with the design, and if, most importantly, the problem that you are solving through the design is actually being solved, then at the end of the day, we can say, okay, the design is a good design or a bad design. So it all centers around the user. It all centers around the community, the people we are designing for, and how those products, how they actually use those products. I don't know if I did answer your question, but I think Dr. Asare can actually add to that as well.
Yeah, I think you answered it perfect. I think what you said about what the user, like the design is meant for the user. So if the user is the one determining what is good design, I think that's something. And that's something I've been really reflecting on this semester in my teaching, where I think one of the students, we had a conversation about what is good design, because it's a question I've also been like struggling with. I think what the design system help us is to really communicate, to do it like quickly and easily, and trying to put things and trying to form like use element based on the principles. But I always go back and it's like because most graphic design doesn't really like follow the grids, and the software we use in itself it becomes a because the software reinforces the need to use the grid, Photoshop, Illustrator, and InDesign. So I think it's a question where I think it's an ongoing. I think it's something ongoing. We all need to think about what is good design in terms of the ethics around design, the bioethics, the like in terms of you designing for the non-human, you designing for like who's the end user and how the users are experiencing the design. It's all part of what makes good design. I don't necessarily think that grades or the design systems really help. It's also part of it, but it's more than just that. I just quickly, anyone else, if you want to raise up your hand, Lawrence. Okay, Lawrence had, yeah. If you want to add to the discussion we are having.
Yes, yeah, I think I just want to encourage designers to embrace, there's a lot that happens in other industries that we don't do. So the idea of monitoring and evaluating the impact and the effects of what we've done. This is something that Design Without Borders does quite a lot, and we've found a lot of value in describing during the early stages of the design process what success will look like. It sounds very much like an economist's perspective or a behavioral scientist's perspective, but that's exactly why it's important. It's because design cuts across, the practice of design requires the application of different sort of realms of knowledge. So describe with your users what success looks like, and then intentionally design tools to collect information about what their experiences have been. I think this is how you might be able to get some feedback on whether your work was good or not. This is just what I think.
Thank you so much. I think we have two more people with their hands. Ayo, do you wanna go?
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Can everybody hear me? Just to make sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Awesome, awesome. Just to kind of like add to that, when we really look at history, we'll see that when it comes to grids and the measurements and all of that, we have to understand that prior to the modern design that we know today, there's been research. Lots of research has been done, especially on the African continent, right? During colonization, we have to also think about the ancient Egyptians. These are Africans prior to Greeks coming in, prior to Rome conquering Egypt, prior to Greeks conquering Egypt. This were Africans, the Kush people. They developed or designed great pyramids, great constructions that even till today, well, hopefully with the help of AI, they can actually figure out how they built those pyramids and those great designs that Africans actually built, right? So a lot of research were done when it comes to African arts, African grid system as well. Studies were done. If we think about Picasso, that's an example of an artist who was not well known prior to him actually coming to Africa and spending a lot of time in Africa. And one of the things that Europeans are very good at, still very good at, is documentation. Now, we were very good at documentation, again, due to slavery, due to hatred, right? A lot of our artwork, a lot of our design work were burnt down. If everyone goes back to the history of the Benin, I'm just using Benin as an example, the Benin Kingdom, but there were many kingdoms all over Africa whose, artwork, research, systems were actually burnt down. And this makes us look as if we don't have those systems in place. We don't have those histories. However, that's why we're talking today, to tap back into those things, to actually educate ourselves and make ourselves students of history, African history, pre-colonialism, and really tap back into those spaces and powers, and understand that those grid system that we're working with today partly comes from us as Africans as well, and they also guide us in modern design as we look back to our own original design. They're all part of the research and documentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ayo. That was lovely. That was very insightful. Thank you so much. I think we all needed to hear that. Thank you so much. I think one more question and then I'll read it. I have a question for Adenya, and then I'll ask her, and then I think we'll do our reflection quickly. Ngozi, do you wanna go?
Yeah, thank you so much. This was amazing. So yeah, so much I have to say. But my question is around when you're designing for many communities, because we're talking about Africa, right? 54 countries, thousands and thousands of different groups, ethnic groups. How do you center when you're thinking about so many people and you're thinking about relevance? How do you kind of center so many people when you're building for a community that is so diverse? I would love to hear like different people's perspectives, because you can't necessarily like walk out into the community because your community may be people across 7 different countries. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think that's a really good question. Any of our presenters kind enough to answer? Lawrence, you've worked across different countries. You've worked in Tanzania, you've worked in Kenya, you've worked in Milan. Do you want to share your experience?
Sure. And thanks for the question. I mean, I was also just trying to give it some more thought. It's not easy. And yes, very often we talk about Africa and forget that it's thousands of ethnic groups, tribes, and just people who live in different situations, different, urban areas, rural areas. The difference is, enormous. And I'd say, at least in my experience, it's about not expecting that you're going to, solve challenges for everybody immediately, or at least it's in describing what scale you're working at in a given moment. So based on the resources that you have available, based on the information that you have available. But again, so the user profiling that we talked about and the user extremes. So understanding that you have users that come from different backgrounds, but then identifying what the extremes are. So who is the person that's most affected? And then who is the person that's least affected? And then trying to work with them very actively to produce potential solutions. And then getting into extensive testing over a very long period of time. I'll say, for instance, that the project that we are doing with the fishing communities is one that is spanning 4 years of a lot of research, a lot of testing, a lot of discussion with different stakeholders. And so I'd say you really have to scope it right from the beginning. You're not going after everybody immediately. There might be a plan to do so, and that you must have a roadmap for that kind of outcome. But you really have to pace yourself. Again, the humility has to play into this. You need to know what you can actually achieve, and then again measure the outcomes at the end of the day. That's really what I would say. But it's not a very easy situation for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just also want to add quickly, and I think for most parts, the idea is not, and just like you said, it's not to resolve, or to include every other ethnic groups identity idea, because it's not a homogeneous take, right? It's diverse. And so I feel that the way to go about it is to be very reflexive about what you are trying to bring on. It's for you to also be open to new ideas, to be open to say that, well, I didn't know this and I am humble enough to learn. Because even within a specific ethnic groups, there are several dialects and several perspectives. And so it's not easy to sort of sustain and resolve the problems of a community, but you always have to think with the people, think alongside them, and not to sort of be like the Euro-American Messiah idea of, okay, I think that this is a representation of Africa, and so this is it. No, because you're always going to have different perspective and different ideas, and so it's always important for you as the designer to always sit back and let people share their ideas to you, and attempt to sort of work with them to create this collective, because collectivism, the practice of collectivism is not an easy thing, right? And which is why democracy is not working. So I believe that we always have to work with this idea in mind, that there's going to be people who are not going to find what we are doing in line with what they are doing, and it's okay, it's fine. We acknowledge that, and we work with the things that we have based on our interactions and encounters with the collective.
Thank you. That was so good. Thank you so much. I think I have a last question for Adenya. I think I'll just, since you showed us I love the Black Stars. That's my favorite football team, and it's something I'm very passionate about. Even though, and we are going to the World Cup, so that's something I'm really looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Arnold, Cameroon is not going to go, so I know the Nigerians are not going. Yes. I have a question for Adenya. What's one practical step you think a designer can take in using the ever ju jijowu symbols, or symbols respectfully in new projects without misrepresenting them?
Okay, thank you. So JCO also means symbols. So it's
Yeah.
just like saying mountain Afajatu.
Okay.
Yeah, so Afajatu means Afaja mountain. So the same thing. So ever JCO or add down JCO. Yeah, so I think one thing is not to call it ever grass symbols. Yeah, grass symbols are a different set of symbols. So that's one starting point. And also to do your personal research on it. Yeah, so don't just take the symbol and just spread it. I think it should be meaningful. It should be it should be reflective when you're using the symbols. It's not just that, okay, I want representation, so let me just also use a JCO or a down JCO. It should be meaningful to your design process. And also for me at this juncture, I think every designer using the JCO or down JCO should also have included in their work educational perspective, not just aesthetic value, because a lot of people are new to this symbol. Even with the cross symbols, a lot of people don't know the meanings. And so if you just place it there without labeling them or giving context, people may not really understand the depth of the symbol you're using. So recently at the Accra, near the Independence Square, we have a nationalism park, and they have the Adon Jesu or the Jesu there, and also with Edinkra symbols and the Gansama, and I think some northern symbols. And what I liked about that design or that work, the artwork, where they wrote the meanings beneath each symbol. They looked at the artwork, and I found it very, very important, because it would help people to understand the name of that symbol and everything. And also, we should not use it in a derogatory form, or it should not have a derogatory narrative, because sometimes some people see maybe artworks from Africa and they call it juju or something. But if you're using it as a designer, you should. I'm not saying that you should say it in one light or just paint the romanticized African culture, no, but also speak the truth about it and ask questions and their stories to them and be respectful in these stories. And also, the work I do, I don't do paid consultancy yet. I think I'll start doing it, and I don't have a lot of energy. So sometimes I tell people I'm not really ready for like consulting or feedback, but sometimes I'm open, and also I'm very open when you also have done your homework, and so that when you come to me, I just give you one or two feedback. There's going to be a festival, an arts festival in the Volta region, and so one guy came to me and wanted me to give it to him like that, give him the symbols. I'm like, my platform is there. I've not kept it away from you. So go and look at it. Look at the symbols you want to use, how it can reflect what you want to do, and then you can come back to me for feedback. And he has been doing that. I use some of his designs, the murals, in my presentation. And so they'll tell, okay, I want to use this, I want to use that. Tell them, okay, include the meaning of the symbol, include the name of the symbol. And they say, okay, they want to credit me for their research. I said, okay, you just use the name of the Adam JCO so that people would be directed to the page that speaks more about the work and on my personal page. And so that feedbacks are important. And then when I see the work, I see that very, very educative, and it doesn't misrepresent, because I do my project, I look at those things very, very well, especially the education part, that even as you are using the symbols, as we are reclaiming our language, our visual language, sometimes we are all Africans, but sometimes it's new to us, and so we should not expect people to understand it at a go. But as we educate them by labeling, they're able to understand them. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. I think it's a very good point, and the way you the way you handled the person who came to you is something which is very admirable. Arnold, do you want to say something quickly before we do the final reflection?
Okay. Thank you so much. I just want to add to what Adali said, especially when using these African symbols. So basically, I'm going to be talking to us, the graphic designers in the house, the brand identity designers. So normally, every brand we work with, business, when we are doing branding for those brands, we are focused on two things. We are focused on the verbal identity, and we are also focused on the visual identity. The visual identity are all of the elements that we bring, that we see physically. The verbal identity basically is how the brand speaks, what's the brand's mission, what's the brand's promise to its target audience, what's the brand's message. And so most times when we are designing with this African element, you don't just pick an element and you place it on a design. You need to ask yourself, this brand, the message behind this brand, does it resonate with the message behind this symbol? Are they in alignment? If they are not in alignment, don't use it, because all of these different symbols and elements, like Adali said, they all have serious meaning. And you need to make sure that some of the elements that you are using are resonating with the brand's message, the brand's tone of voice, and the brand's promise to its target audience. You need to be very, very intentional about that. And even, of course, how the brand communicates. So when focusing on the verbal identity before you even get to the visual identity, make sure that all of the elements that you're going to be using, do your brainstorming session, your research session, as you're crafting the brand message, as you're crafting the brand's tone of voice, as you're crafting the brand's promise to its target audience, make sure that the elements that you plan to use or the symbols that you plan to use are all in alignment with all of these different messages. So before you even get to the visual aspect of things. So I just really wanted to add to that. Let's really be intentional about how we design, both verbally and visually. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much. And it's been such a lovely, lovely conversation, and I've really enjoyed it. I've learned so much, and I think thanks so much for the presenters for sharing their work, being generous, being kind to share, put themselves out there. I think it's not easy presenting your work and trying to distill all the knowledge you've had into one quick 15, 20-minute presentation. I think it's something we all find hard, and I think thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's something like it's making me very emotional. So thank you so much. I think going forward, we just don't want the conversation to just die down and just be one of. So what is going to happen is what we plan to do is moving forward. So I've put in the link. There's a link on the chat. So what we are going to do is we're going to collate a lot of the reflections and ideas and works from everyone. If you have any question, any idea, something you want to write, something you're passionate, your work, I think it will be good for if you be kind enough to just go on the link. The link is in the chat. Just fill there and then put in any idea, an abstract of an idea, and then in the next 2 to 3 months we'll get a website ready, and then we'll have those ideas and a lot of the things we've talked about. The presenters will be writing some of their work and also sharing their ideas in there, and then it'll be much more an expansive project going forward, so that we build a community going forward, and we can have we start documenting our knowledge. We just don't present and you don't hear from everyone. And also encourage people to, if you have any questions or any feedback or reflections, I'm sure the presenters all shared their social media handles, their LinkedIn, their Instagram, their Facebook. If you want to reach out to them, you can reach out to them personally. You could have a conversation with them, and you could also connect with them how you want to collaborate with them in your work or future. And I'll urge you to try as much as possible to please click on the link and then try and put in, like, you can just fill the form and put any work idea, something you want to share, something you want to put out there. And then when we start the website and then we build a community around it, we could move the conversation forward. And you never know who's reading your work. Someone will find your work, a student, someone, and a practitioner will find your work or something you've written and something you've shared very useful, and they will add to your practice, and that will really change. Well, and that, like, your work will then lead to real change in the world. And this is something we need to do. We need to move from the conversation, and sometimes you could tell me the complaint that's get some action going for it. So thank you so much. Thank you. It's been a lovely evening, Saturday evening from Melbourne. So I think I wrote a few things. I'm just going to quickly share, and then I think some will call it a day, some will continue their work. So we've had hundreds join us from Accra, Kampala, Yaoundé, London, Melbourne, the US, like everywhere, every part of the world has been represented here. And the presenters moved from symbols and rituals to classroom to humanitarian work, showing that design here is a culture, relation, and responsibility. So for me, three truths stood out. First, African knowledge is already designing daily life. The work is recognition, resources, and scale. Second, aesthetics is not just decoration, but memory and method. A living vocabulary that connects places and history. And thirdly, decolonization is practical. Stable assets shared, like what we did, shared slides where we worked. I shared a slide, someone presented. Those simple acts of relationality, really clear credit, informed consent, and the last thing we talk about, and room for many voices. Care is not extra, care is the method. So what next is what I talked about. Like, we keep convening and making it useful. We keep talking amongst each other. We keep sharing our work, and we keep putting ourselves out there and sharing our knowledge and making sure Africa is heard. Africa is part of the conversation. So I'll just quickly leave you and say thank you so much, and then have a lovely evening. If the presenters will be kind enough to just stay behind, so we do a quick debrief, and then we'll have I don't know, we'll have a glass of online champagne or something. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.